This is the Humans of Gaming podcast, an open and honest conversation about games, life, and belief. Hey, welcome to Humans of Gaming. My name is Chris Gwaltney, and I am the Chief Executive Nerd for Love Thy Nerd, and I'm one of the hosts for this podcast. Our other host is here, but actually he's going to be our special guest today, too. Say hi, Drew.
Hey, Drew. Hi, Drew. Sorry, I got it wrong.
Wow, good one.
Yeah, it's a classic.
Yeah.
It's already off to a bad start. I'm sorry. No, I'm Drew Dixon. I am the Chief Content Nerd at Love Thy Nerd, which means I kind of oversee our website and stuff. And that's me.
So this is the second time we're doing this. Last time we did this, it was with me as the guest, but we thought it'd be cool to kind of get to know the hosts of the podcast, as it were. So a little while ago, we did an episode where Drew interviewed me, and now we're going to do an episode where I interviewed Drew.
You and your self-conscious
cricket in my pocket or whatever.
Jiminy.
Yeah. Old Jiminy. Yeah. So no, I think it's cool, for us to get to know each other, and for our listeners, you guys with this in your ear holes, get to know us a little bit better, and yeah, just kind of in the spirit of our podcast. So yeah, man, let's just dive right in. Drew, why don't you give us the Drew Dixon elevator pitch for, who you are and what you do in this industry we call nerd culture.
Yeah. So, like I said, I'm the Chief Content Nerd at Love Thy Nerd, which just means that I oversee a team of editors and writers who produce most of the site content that we do. Of course, we have podcasts too that I just kind of help with. I don't necessarily lead those. But yeah, so I've been an editor professionally for about 8 years, something like that. So that's kind of in my wheelhouse. I've also been in ministry in the past, been a pastor. I worked for an organization called Game Church for about 6 years as the editor of that website and just kind of leading side content for them. Yeah. So, I've been writing mostly about video games, but about nerd culture for a long time now, for, 10 or so years, I guess. From a Christian perspective, I think there was a point in my life when I kind of decided I was going to get back into video games and nerd culture, and sort of stopped being ashamed about being a nerd and stuff, I guess.
Yeah.
And I felt a real burden to think about nerd culture from a distinctly Christian perspective that wasn't like one of fear, but one of of curiosity, and I wanted to engage that medium in a way that would be meaningful and helpful for people and help people understand it. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of what I've been trying to do for a while now, even before I started with Game Church. And Game Church just kind of ended up being like an outlet for that was of like mind in a lot of ways, that was a godsend. And then now, of course, we started to Love Thy Nerd a little over a year ago. And of course, it's been a wonderful,
wild ride.
Yeah, it's been, another tremendous godsend that I think a place for me to do those things in a way that I hope is helpful for the church. I hope is helpful for, people outside the church, just to feel loved and valued. And, that's the elevator pitch, I guess.
Yeah. And you've written, I'm biased, but you've written some cool stuff, and you've written some cool stuff for like cool outlets. What are some of the places, or where are some of the places you've written for online about games?
Sure. Yeah. So I got started writing about video games for a website called Christ Pop Culture that I actually served as the editor, one of like the 3 lead editors of that site for a couple years before I started with Game Church. So I wrote for them for a while. I've written for Relevant Magazine. I've written for Christianity Today, World Magazine, Paste Magazine, the Christian Research Institute. Those are the ones that
Love Thy Nerd. You've written for those.
Love Thy Nerd. Yeah. Game Church. Yeah. So I already mentioned those, but yeah. So I think there was a time when not many people, and I think it's probably still the case, honestly, there weren't a lot of Christians writing thoughtfully about video games or nerd culture. I think that's changing now. And so I kind of, 6 or 8, 10 years ago, whenever it was, 10 years ago is when I got started. 8 years ago is when I maybe got serious about it. And really started like putting myself out there. But I just was like, hey, Relevant, you should be covering video games. And so I emailed them and was like, hey,
it's in the name, Relevant. Hello.
Right. Yeah. I'm like, hey, Relevant, do you know video games are a big deal? Let me write some stuff for you. And they're like, okay. Yeah. So it was really just me kind of putting myself out there, trying to make things happen. And so,
This may be impossible to answer, but I'm just curious. Do you have like a favorite article that you've ever written?
Oh man. Or
maybe like what's one that comes to mind that you're like super proud
of? Sure. There's a few there's one that I guess I always think about because, do you know who Tom Bissell is?
That sounds familiar.
He's a famous video game critic, I guess. He wrote a book called Extra Lives, Why Video Games Matter. That was kind of a big deal. Yeah. And he wrote for he was like the video game writer for Grantland, when Grantland was like a big deal. And anyway, I wrote a article called Dissonant Reviews, about Papo and Yo for this site called Bit Creature. They just publish like weird, whatever, like kind of video game stuff, but it was a really fun site. And I wrote this, and basically the article was about how people were missing the point of Papo and Yo. A lot of people who were reviewing it were getting caught up in like, oh, this puzzle isn't perfectly designed and the controls should be better, but they were missing the bigger picture that this was like a really powerful story about what it's like to have someone you love be destroyed by alcohol, like addiction to alcohol. That's what that game is. It's a metaphorical game about a boy whose father is an alcoholic and is abusive. And anyway, I thought it was a powerful story. And so it sort of just pointed out how I think everyone was missing the forest for the trees. And I just always remember that article because Tom Bissell commented on it, was like, you said this better than I could, and this was a really great article.
High praise right there, my man.
It's sort of like,
dang,
you remember the ones when someone like you really respect thinks you did something cool. So anyway, I feel like I'm bragging on myself.
No, I asked you to, so it makes it okay. Correct me if I'm wrong because my memory sucks, but that game was pretty like early on in the kind of like surge of indie games that were like really tackling like more meaningful stuff like that, right? Like that game was kind of early on in that.
Yeah, this was like pre That Dragon Cancer, So it was definitely one of the first games that was like dealing with some like heavy, there's this wave of empathy games, and it was one of the early like empathy games that you would say this game's giving you a window into someone's life experience that's different than most people's.
Right. Yeah.
Or a lot of people's.
So similar question. What's a piece that you've edited that like really struck you or you're really proud of or you really loved?
I would say just about all of the educational articles we've been publishing at Love Thy Nerd recently. I mean, I think all of those I'm pretty proud to have on the website. Not necessarily all of them are ones I personally edited, but those come to mind. So we've done the series on why X thing matters in nerd culture. So like we did one on like why furries matter that Joey Thurmond wrote that I only did some light editing on. I believe it was Madeline Turnipseed and April Lynn who did most of the editing on that one. I think Madeline kind of led the way, but just like where else are you going to read that? Like what, especially on a Christian site, like where else are you going to read something like that? And I think they managed to show how there's value in this. Joey did, and that, you know, I think that's really just really curious and doing a good job of seeing the good in nerd culture in a way that I think is really valuable and rare. Some other articles I'm proud of is we've got some like really great God of War articles.
Yeah.
There's 2 that are really great on the site. So, both about,
Daddy
writers
issues.
of ours that have had, real father issues that they've worked through. But just examples of how like playing games, can be cathartic, and, if we'll be thoughtful about the way we engage them, we can learn more about the world and about ourselves through the way we play them. Those are some of the things anything that we put on the site that helps people like navigate life more thoughtfully is something I'm usually really proud of.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I'm assuming your love of games and stuff started young, or when did you kind of get into the whole video game thing?
Yeah, pretty young. I mean, I remember like my first memory of like playing games is my parents bought an NES, thinking my mom would she was like, I'll play this. Me and your dad will play this.
Yeah.
And then, my
that was pretty progressive for your parents.
Yeah. And then they like only played Mario a little bit and maybe a little bit of Duck Hunt. And then they were done with it. And my brother and I took it over. I mean, I remember playing, the original Zelda on it and Contra constantly.
Oh man.
That
game, I defy anyone to beat that game without the Konami code.
Oh,
I don't see how
like
it's possible.
In this day and age, there's some speedrunner that's done it blindfolded or something.
That's ridiculous. Or they've done it with the Donkey Kong drums or whatever.
Yeah, the Dance.
Have you seen that crap when people do that? Like they do Destiny raids with like the Donkey Kong drums, or they run through the entirety of Dark Souls naked with no weapons using the like DDR dance mat or some crap.
Yep. Yeah.
Gosh,
it's ridiculous.
That does not seem enjoyable.
Yeah, I've never been that kind of level of player, but yeah, man, it was pretty early, and I kind of played a bit of everything growing up. Like I was really into Final Fantasy games. One of my memorable moments was I got an N64 on launch, like saved up for it, like mowed lawns and everything, like saved up for it, bought it. Then, of course, not long after that, Final Fantasy VII came out, was a PlayStation exclusive, right? And I was like, I gotta get Final Fantasy VII. Well, my mom was like, you're not getting a PlayStation. You already have a game system.
Oh yeah.
There's no way we're letting you get a play. I was like, I'll buy it with my own money. Like I'll save up. Like I was mowing a bunch of lawns and stuff. I was like, I'll buy it. You don't have to buy it for me. She was, no, you're not getting it. So, I actually like rode my bike to the like local game store that was, I mean, it was probably like, a 3 or 4 mile bike ride at, for when I was pretty young. It must have been like middle school or younger, maybe. That was middle school. Yeah, it had to have been middle school. And bought it at the game store, bought a PlayStation, bought Final Fantasy VII, put it in my backpack, and rode back home. And my parents never knew. Like they would just see me playing.
Okay.
Yeah, they would just see me playing. And he's playing the
Nintendo 64.
Like,
so did you like hide the console and they would just see the TV and just assume you're playing the 64, or like? Yeah.
I mean, like at this point I had a TV in my room.
Crafty little devil.
Yeah. I think I had a TV in my room, and so I was like, he's just playing his game.
Playing the Digi games.
The game. That's what my parents called it. He's playing the game.
That was 97, I think, is when Final Fantasy VII came out, right?
Yeah.
Or am I remembering that wrong?
Something, I think it's around then. Yeah. So yeah, I played a ton of that. But then also I remember times when I'd play like Warcraft 2 and StarCraft over dial-up, like with friends, and so I got a little bit into computer gaming, but never had a great PC, so I didn't get too much into PC gaming. I was always like begging my parents to get a better graphics card so I could play like Jedi Knight 2 or something,
Oh, yeah.
but yeah, so, and later years into like college and stuff, LAN parties with Halo and that kind of thing. So it was always my jam.
Yeah. Now, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Amarillo, Texas, which is in the Texas Panhandle. So like the very northernmost part of Texas, like that top square when you're looking at the map, you know, between Oklahoma and New Mexico. So
yeah.
And people are always like, "Oh, you're from Texas. I know someone from Houston." It's like, well, right. Houston's like really big, one, and also it's like 9 or 10 hours.
Might as well be in a different state. Yeah,
yeah.
My Texas geography is terrible. Like,
yeah.
I mean, in general, my geography is terrible, but especially Texas, I think.
Yeah.
So growing up there, I mean, what was that like? What was your experience growing up? Now, did you stay in Texas your whole growing up, or did you move? Or
yeah, I was born there and lived there my whole life. In fact, went to college locally at Amarillo College, and then West Texas A&M University, which is just in Canyon, which is just 15 miles south of Amarillo. So yeah, it was, you know, I think it's a good place to grow up. Like, it's probably a good place to raise a family and stuff. I think that's a big part of why my parents were there. So yeah, it was good. Kind of like a fairly conservative like town, I guess. Although I didn't necessarily think of it that way. You know, you don't know any better.
Well, if it's all you know, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's pretty like religiously conservative too, like lots of churches and stuff. Not maybe as much as the South, where I mean, I live in the American South now in Nashville. It's not quite the level of here, but close, I'd say. Pretty. But I didn't like, it wasn't a big deal for me. Religion wasn't like a big deal in our family, I would say.
Yeah. Were you raised like Christian, or your parents that way, or what was that like?
Yeah, for sure. But it was also like not something we ever talked about, you know?
Okay.
And also like, I think, as I got older, I sort of perceived it as like church was like a social thing for my parents, but it didn't feel like at the time anyway, like a super religious thing for them. Or that was my perception anyway. And so like we didn't go all the time. Like we went kind of every other Sunday or so or something like that. I just don't remember having conversations with my parents about God or the gospel or why we go to church even, you know? So yeah, just kind of different than maybe a lot of people's experience. Cause I don't think my parents were ever super pushy about like making sure I made a decision for Jesus or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there any, I always like to ask this question, like people that grew up, you know, even somewhat religious, like, was there any tension with the whole, like you being into video games and stuff? I mean, probably not if they bought you an NES.
Yeah. Well, they bought themselves an NES.
Yeah. That's okay. That's right. My apologies.
And we kind of subsumed it. But
did you just say subsume? You are a freaking writer. I have never heard that word used.
I may not have used that correctly. So,
wow.
But
fact check at the end.
Yeah, fact check me, somebody. Yeah, so there was some tension with my parents and me playing video games, but it was never like from the perspective of like, oh, that's spiritually dangerous or something. They're just like, don't you want to go outside? Like, isn't that going to rot your brain or something? But they didn't, you know, it's funny nowadays, everybody's like, make sure you limit the amount of, like, my parents didn't really set limits for, like, they did probably during the school week, I guess, if I remember right.
I'm even surprised you said you had a TV in your room. Like,
yeah,
my parents barely had a TV in the entire house, let alone like let me have one in the room.
Yeah. I mean, it was like a tiny, crappy TV, but I did eventually convince them to let me have a TV in my room where I played a lot of
Final Fantasy VII.
Final Fantasy VII, Shadows of the Empire on N64.
Oh, yeah.
Stuff like that.
I remember playing a side story. I remember when that game was coming out, because that was 64, right? The Shadows of the Empire.
Yeah.
And they had a demo. I don't know if it was at Target or I don't remember where I was, but they had it on demo. But it was a timed demo.
Yeah.
So after, I mean, I don't know if it was 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever, it would just reset. The game would just reset. And so I sat there, I don't know how long, and tried, cause I wanted to beat the first level to see like what the second level was like. Cause I think the first level of that is like, you're on Hoth and you're like in the air speeder. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, this is cool, but I want to see like what the first person shooter or like third person, whatever it was, but I could never get past it ever. And it was the worst. Anyway, that's my Shadows of the Empire story.
It's one of those games, like, I don't think I ever want to play it again because the way I remember it in my mind is this amazing game. Oh, I know if I played it now, I'd be like, why did I love this so much?
Garbage.
So I just want to keep that memory.
I did that with the Gargoyles cartoon. Did you ever watch that growing up?
A little bit.
So I have such fond memories of that show. And not too long ago in my adulthood, I tried to watch it, and it is so cringy, like real bad.
Yeah. I wonder that about like DuckTales and Darkwing Duck. And
yeah, some things are just better left in that little nostalgia pocket. For sure. So, I mean, obviously now, like, you're a professed Christian, or at least I assume so, since you're a part of Love Thy Nerd. Maybe we should have checked that, but, when did that happen? I mean, you said, cause growing up, that wasn't necessarily like a serious part or something you really talked about a lot. Like, was there, a moment or a period of time that happened? Like, what was that like?
Yeah. So I think I was like probably, kind of your standard American teenager. I don't know, in a lot of ways. Like, so, a lot of my friends were, starting to get into drinking and even drugs and stuff. And I was like, kind of this place in my life where I was like, is that what I want to do? Or who do I want to be? Mm-hmm. And at the same
you were
time,
how old at this time, you think?
17. Yeah. Okay. 17. And so, I started around the same time, like I had interest in this girl, and I started kind of trying to date her, and found out she was pretty active at this church. So I was like, well, I'll check it out with her. And so through the process
begins.
Through the process of chasing this girl as a 17-year-old, I started attending this like pretty conservative, like super conservative church. Mm-hmm. It was an independent Baptist church. Okay. Which, broke off a lot of not all independent Baptist churches, but a lot of independent Baptist churches broke off from the Southern Baptist Convention because they thought the Southern Baptist Convention was like a little too liberal. Like the Southern Baptist Convention.
Isn't that hilarious though? Like just thinking about the relativity of that.
Right.
Is like, that's just funny.
Yeah. So, but none of this, I didn't understand any of this as a 17-year-old.
Right,
I just liked this girl, right?
Yep, 100%.
But in the process of going to this very conservative Baptist church, and I'll say this, like, I'm really thankful for this church in a lot of ways. And I'll explain more about why in a minute, but, this church was actually like more liberal by some independent Baptist church standards because they they allowed preaching from the New King James.
So like hold the phones.
Yeah. And I think even the NIV was okay. So wow. So it was like they had split from another church over that issue. So like there was another. They'd split off from this other church because they were like, no, it's okay to preach from other versions than the King James.
Yeah.
But still, it was like, there's some weird stuff that happened at this church. Just like, I remember we had like a prophecy conference one time where there was like, where they were telling people like, you really shouldn't play with like various toys and like Pokemon and like all these different things because they're like related to demons and blah, blah, blah. And like, of course, Harry Potter was problematic, stuff like that. So, but what I do remember is, every week they would have an invitation. So I would go to church with my girlfriend. We were dating pretty quickly after all this. And, cause she thought I was a Christian. I mean, I think I thought I was a Christian, right? Like,
yeah, sure.
I went to church a few times, once or twice a month. So it's like, yeah, sure, I'm a Christian. Well, so they would do an invitation, which for our listeners who are not familiar with what that means, it's like at the end of the service on Wednesday nights, like youth service Wednesday night and Sunday morning, like the main church service. So for the students, like the teenagers, and then for everybody on Sunday morning, there's always at the end of the service, like this time where it's like, all right, everybody, close your eyes and bow your head. And like, if you've never trusted Jesus as your personal Lord and Savior, I want to give you that opportunity now to come up to the front and pray the sinner's prayer with me. You'd pray the sinner's prayer, and it's like, okay, now you're saved. Like now you get to go to heaven and stuff, and Jesus has forgiven your sins and blah, blah, blah. And
do you remember the sinner's prayer? I'm actually sitting here thinking about it, and I don't.
I mean, yeah, I don't know that there's like a standard. I mean, there's.
Well, I think there is. There was initially, but it's probably morphed and changed.
Yeah. But yeah, I know the basics. I think I got it down. But I remember I remember as a teenager, like almost being terrified at times. Like I've never, because that wasn't a part of my church tradition growing up. Like we went to Methodist and Presbyterian churches, kind of like more main, for lack of a better word, like mainline Protestant churches. And it just wasn't something that we did in the churches I visited, where it was like, oh, you gotta pray this prayer. And so I had this whole like crisis of, am I a Christian? Like if, and the whole, like, if I died tonight, where would I go kind of thing? Yeah. And I remember like, there were times when I couldn't sleep at night because I'm like, I don't know if that's me. So, and here's where I'm thankful for it. Like, I think some of that's misses what like when we fixate just on that, we miss the bigger picture of what the gospel's about. But I am thankful that church forced me to really think about, like, it was the first time I'd ever really thought about, what do I really believe about Jesus? What do I think about the Bible? Like, what do I think about these really big concepts of life and purpose and mission? And just never given serious thought to that. And if you had asked me, like, are you a Christian? I'd be like, yeah, sure. I think Jesus is kind of cool and stuff. Like, so it's kind of that was the starting point for me is I was like, I got to start reading the Bible. So I started reading the Bible pretty ferociously, and even like started a prayer group at my high school with people just to get together and pray and stuff. And, it was like going on mission trips with this church, and even started leading in the youth group in some ways, I guess. And I remember we went to like this revival one Wednesday night. The Wednesday night was when you did youth Bible study, like youth service, essentially, where we'd have like our own church service just for the teenagers. And we went to this revival, and there was, of course, a big invitation. And I went up to the front, because I was like, well, I've never done the whole go up to the front thing. Yeah. And that was like a big deal in the church that I was visiting. So I was like, well, I got to do that, because what if that's like the thing that you have to do to get into heaven?
Right. Might as well tick that box. Better safe than sorry.
Yeah. And then I didn't do it. And then I'd be like screwed, right? I didn't want that to happen. So I did that. I went up to the front, and this guy that counseled me, I think it was just very, I don't know what the word is. I think he handled the situation really well. He was like, so tell me about who you are, why you're here. Like, why did you come up to the front? And I was kind of like, well, I just want to make sure I'm good. I'll make sure I'm saved. And he was like, well, tell me about your life and what you've been up to, and like what you believe about Jesus and stuff. We just had a conversation about the gospel, and he was like, yeah, I think you're a Christian, And he was like, I don't think you need to like pray any special prayer or do anything. Just keep trying to follow Jesus, and that's what this is about. It's like, oh, really? Just follow Jesus. Yeah. That's all you got to do, man.
That's simple.
It's that simple. Just try to follow him. And I was like, okay, well, I can do that. And that's kind of when that's when I remember like self-identifying. Oh, that's who I am. I'm a Jesus follower. And it's kind of everything changed from there, I guess, in terms of my religious life. Yeah. So yeah.
Well, switching gears just a little bit from there, because I'm sure this was a part of things. When did like writing become a fascination for you?
I started a blog like everybody did I guess it was around college when I was finishing college and starting seminary. That I'm not going to tell you what it was called or where you might could find it because it's probably still online somewhere. And I don't want anybody to read it.
What is it?
No, I really don't want to say.
Why was it bad?
No, I mean, it's not at the time. I'm sure it was fine, but like this is some of my earliest writing. And also like, so when you're in college and seminary, by the way, like, I think those are some of the most arrogant times of every person's life, but particularly when it comes to, like, when you put religion in that mix, it's a special cocktail for self-righteousness. And so,
amen. Yep.
Yeah, I'm really not proud of some of the self-righteous stuff I wrote back then. That's the biggest thing. Not just that it was like bad writing or something.
We all did it, man. We were all there. It's that age. I think it's just that early 20s, age that there's just all this piss and vinegar and, channeled well. There's a lot of like passion and fire and that kind of stuff. But typically in my experience, it comes out pretty nasty.
Yeah. And it's not coupled with like lived, embodied, with an embodied Christian life that's like really trying to live out the great commandment, which is to love God and love our neighbor. There's a lot of lack of love, I think, or empathy in some of the things that, not everything, but some of the things I wrote. But yeah, I think at the time I thought it was like passion and fire for God or something. But
so not really then until college, like through high school or anything like that. I mean, were you writing stuff or did you have any like teachers that were like, oh man, you're a good writer, you should pursue this? Or was it just not really a thing prior to college?
Yeah, actually I remember I guess it was freshman English in college. I had I remember it made me so mad. I had a English professor that was like, she gave me a B, I think it was like a B minus or a B plus. It was a B on this paper. And she wrote on there, like, she was like, you're the best writer in this class. You should write more. I gave you a B because she's like, I gave you a B because you had too many comma splices. And I was like, oh, like, but it made me really mad that she gave me the B. But I just remember thinking like, oh, maybe I'm decent at this. Like, because you have somebody who obviously knows the craft as a professor to tell you.
What's so crazy to me is like the amount of influence and power that teachers like that wield. Like she wrote a few lines on your paper, and I am sure she wasn't thinking the amount of impact that could have on you, but like just those few things instilled something small in you of like, oh, maybe this is something I could pursue. And like, dude,
I think about it a lot with my kids because
that's nuts.
Because words are powerful. It's like saying things like, I believe in you, or you can do it to your kids is super important.
Yeah. No pressure.
Yeah. But then I think I really like developed a love for it when I was a pastor in Alabama. So I finished seminary.
So talk about, college. So you went to like local university.
In part because I was like still trying to figure out if I was going to like marry this girl that I'd started dating in high school and stuff.
Did she go to the same school?
Yeah, we both went to Emerald College and it didn't work out. Like, I'll just go ahead and pop that bubble.
Okay.
I did not marry her.
Dang, we were really pulling for that.
Yeah. But she was a great person. It just, I was a kid. I didn't know what I was doing.
I know.
But in the process of like in college, I got a job at a church in Amarillo as like a youth intern, which kind of like made me want to pursue ministry more seriously. So, did that all through college and then went to seminary, in Louisville, Kentucky. And that, I think there too, I developed a passion for like studying theology and thinking thoughtfully about the Bible and what do I believe about God and that kind of stuff.
What was your focus in seminary?
So I started out as biblical and theological studies. So like lots of Greek and Hebrew. And I ended up changing to Christian ministry, a master's of divinity in Christian ministry, which just means like I had a lot more flexibility about what I studied.
You're a professional Christian.
Yeah, a lot of Greek classes, a lot of theology. That was kind of my focus. This is the kind of seminary student I was. I didn't like all the like practical stuff, like all those classes about like leadership and because I was like, I just want to. I'm here to study theology, which
that is literally the opposite of me.
Yeah,
I'm like, funny. Who cares about all this heady crap? Like, how do we actually do this?
Yeah. See, I needed more of your mentality. You may have needed more, or maybe didn't need more of mine. Maybe you're fine.
No, I probably do.
But so then I got into I ended up at a church in Albertville, Alabama, Northeast Alabama, in a rural area, which that's a whole nother like kind of long, funny story. But I think being in this kind of rural city, there weren't a lot of like creative outlets for me, like it's not, I'm very thankful for my time there, and the church I was with there is like full of just awesome, wonderful people. But at the same time, it's not like I like culture. I like being around people. I like being around ideas. And it's not a cultural center, if you will. So,
and you were there. You were like the lead pastor, or you were associate pastor? Or?
My title was family pastor. So I was like, it was me and another pastor that planted this church together.
Yeah.
And so he was the primary preacher. I preached probably like 10 or so times a year. And then I did a lot. I basically did all the other stuff. Like I led the student ministry. I kind of oversaw the children's ministry there. Kind of helped oversee our small groups ministry, stuff like that. So it was a cool gig in that like I got to do lots of stuff,
See how the sausage was made.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Yeah.
So, but in that living in that city, like I needed a creative outlet. So writing kind of became that, and like writing about video games really became a big part of that there. That's like really where I dug in and started, writing seriously and thoughtfully as a Christian about video games. And, that was like, that's like, it's funny as a pastor, that's when I really started letting my like nerd flag fly, as it were, like, even though I feel like still, even then, like I had to be kind of careful about it, because it's like, I didn't want people in the church to think I was like
calculated.
Yeah. Like too into video games or something. Or
I remember doing that too.
Yeah. Like I remember when I started working for Game Church, I was like, that was when I was a pastor at that church. So I started working for Game Church part-time on the side. And I was like, I wonder if they'll feel threatened by the fact that I have this other job and fire me or something.
Yeah.
But they were pretty cool about it for the most part. I remember there were times when like the elders of the church were like, I don't get it. Like, what's this about?
Yeah.
They didn't see it. It was hard for them to see it as like a ministry opportunity or like a way to connect with people in a meaningful way.
Yeah. So earlier you mentioned just an offhand comment of like when you got back into video games. Oh yeah. What's that mean?
Yeah. So I think when I was in seminary, I was like, because we hear this stuff in church, even though my parents were never, they didn't like make me feel shame, like religious shame or something. I didn't get any of that kind of stuff from my parents about video games or nerd stuff. But you get it in the church. And like, I went to some pretty conservative Christian churches. And so I definitely got that. I heard that message of like, where everybody takes that, verse from 1 Corinthians, I believe it is, out of context, where it's like, when I became a man, I left, I put childish things aside and like, which is not that's not what Paul's talking about at all there. Yeah. But so I just felt like I need to like grow up. And, so through seminary, I'd still play every now and then. But I really kind of quit playing video games. And it wasn't until, moving to Alabama in the first couple years when I was like, started getting back into it. I think it was like funny. It's like Fallout 3. That's a game I remember playing a lot of as being like one of the first games. I was like, oh, maybe games are kind of like growing up. Like they actually have something in, like it was a game that had something interesting to say, at least posed some really interesting moral questions to the player that I thought were interesting. And so I remember playing that and going like, oh, like this is intriguing to me, both as a person, as a human being, but also as like someone who's trying to follow Jesus. Like there's these are doing interesting things and saying interesting things about the world and about people. So, yeah.
Do you remember the first game you wrote about?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. It might have been Fallout 3.
Really?
I have to look it up. It would be something on Christ and pop culture. But that was definitely one of the first.
Your humble beginnings.
Yeah. And then I wrote a ton of stuff about Far Cry 2.
Oh, don't you dare. Gosh, we almost made it. We almost made it through this entire thing without you bringing up Far Cry.
Yeah, had to go there.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So, you're married.
Yep.
Kids.
Yep. True.
How many kids? How long you been married?
How many? So I've been married for 10 years, over 10 years now. And we have 3 kids. Evelyn is about to turn 8. And Gwyneth is 5, and Thatcher is like 20 months, 19, 20 months, somewhere in there.
I don't think I've ever told you, but your kids have cool names. Good job.
Thanks. Tell that to my wife. She second guesses it sometimes.
Whose ideas were they?
They were all mutual. They were all basically all of them were except for Gwyneth, I think. We both really dug Gwyneth. I still really like that name.
Yeah.
I like all of our kids' names, honestly, but they were all like compromises, you know?
Yeah.
They were neither of our first choice. So, my wife, her name is Jennifer. And so she's born in the 80s. And like a lot of people born in the 80s, if you're a woman, you know, female born in the 80s, like there's a good chance your name's Jennifer. Yeah. And so she always hated that so many people have that name. Mm-hmm. And so she really wanted our kids to have unique names. So, but not like weird. That was the balance. Like we didn't want it to be weird, but we wanted it to be.
There's a line there somewhere. It's a delicate balance.
Yeah,
for sure.
I don't know if we hit it, but yeah, no, I'm a big fan of my kids and of my wife. So they're great. And I'm
that's good because you're stuck with them.
Yeah, my wife and I met in seminary, and she's amazing. Like she's my best friend. So, doesn't work out. Marriage doesn't work out for everybody, but I'm really a big fan of mine.
It's hard work.
So it is for sure.
Yeah. So, one thing I wanted to talk about or have you share about is, unfortunately, I guess you can answer this. Love Thy Nerd is not like your full-time paying gig.
Yeah.
Barely pays anything.
Right.
So like, what do you do to pay bills and
sure.
what's your day job?
Yeah. So I'm an editor for a Christian publishing company in Nashville, Lifeway, and I write Bible studies that churches use basically for students, for like teenagers, student ministries in churches. And been doing that for about almost 6 years, I guess. Just crazy.
And you got into that after the Alabama church, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I was working at this church in Alabama, but on the side, I was like we talked about earlier, I had written for Relevant and written and edited for Christ Pop Culture and all these different places and stuff. And so I actually like one day realized, hey, I have like a resume here. I've actually done some things, so which was surprising. And so I was like, my brother was bugging me to move to Nashville because he had moved here. I was like, you should apply at some of these like Christian publishing houses in Nashville and see if you can work here. And then we could live in the same city. Oh, nice. And I thought that was not a good reason to move, but, but I did like, I've always had a passion for writing and editing, and those are skills I have. And so, I eventually looked into it and it all kind of worked out. So, really, I just enjoy doing those things, and it's cool to be able to do that in a way that serves churches, and helps them in their ministry and in their mission, of Christian formation, discipleship, that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Does it scare the crap out of you that you're like writing and editing these studies about, one of the most hotly contested books? Well, I would dare say the most hotly contested book in all of human history. You're writing studies about it. to give to the most formative age, I dare say, of people that will be leading, tomorrow's future or whatever.
Yeah.
That would scare the crap out of me.
I hadn't really thought about that way till you phrased it that way, but now I am. Now I'm scared. No, I definitely think about it.
But it makes me think about what we said about the teacher earlier, like just these simple things that she wrote for you that kind of like put you on a bit of a trajectory.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's simultaneously the hardest part of my day job. Mm-hmm. And the most rewarding part of it too. 'Cause it's like, you give the opportunity to like frame how somebody thinks about God. Right. That's pretty heavy.
That's a big deal.
And I think a lot of people like get a wonky frame in our day and age. Like they have a wonky and walk away. Like that's a big part of why Love Thy Nerd exists. A lot of people walk away from the church and from God is because some church made them think that the gospel was all about kind of looking down on people for not being like you or something, or that the gospel was about what you don't do, all these things that we're not supposed to do because we're good Christians or something. And then their whole like vision of God ends up being skewed. And eventually, and a lot of them just say, well, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. It's not good for me as a person. So yeah, I think the work that I do, that's what excites me. The work that I do can help people see like there's a God that loves them and wants a relationship with them. It's the same thing that excites me about Love Thy Nerd is we have the opportunity to help people, nerds know that they're loved and valued by God,
Yeah. Well, don't blow it.
I will try not to.
Yeah. So maybe the final question I have is, what is it about the written word that you think is so powerful or that like draws you to wanting to do that?
That's you. I feel like you're asking much better questions than I asked.
I saved the best for last.
What is it about the written word? Well, I mean, I guess I think back to like, the whole premise of Christianity is based on words, right? And on a message that's been written down and passed on to us. And at the foundation of it is this message that God created the world through the power of words. And then I think of like James 3, where James says like the words are really powerful. Like they have the power to destroy. He says it's his really negative view. Like he says, be really careful with your words because they can just absolutely wreck people. But Jesus is the Word of God, and our faith is based on good news, a good message, a good words from God to us about the world, about what He's doing in the world to renew it and redeem it and show forth His love for it. So yeah, I guess that's like. I think of writing in that sense of like it's an opportunity to do what God does and what God did in creation, what God continues to do in the world through as the gospel like is proclaimed. Writing is an opportunity to join in that same like vocation, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I it sounds like I'm always like have this like holy. That's not always like holy view of the task. I don't. A lot of times I just like, I got to crank this thing out. I'm going to do it. Well, yeah. But on my better days, I think of it that way. And that's what excites me about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I think is bullcrap is that quote that's like, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life.
Yeah.
I think that's such a dumb quote. Yeah. It's just not real. And anybody that says that that's true, come at me, bro.
Yeah.
Because there's still work. Like, dude, we do what we love with this podcast and with Love Thy Nerd, but like, there's still times you just got to grind,
Yep. And when you're doing what you love, a lot of times you put yourself in a position where you work harder than you should and overwork yourself, and put yourself in an unhealthy place. So
anyway, rabbit trail. Well, hey, this was super cool. Getting to hear some of that stuff. I've never heard some of that stuff. So this has been good for us too, I think.
Yeah, it's fun.
As our friendship blossoms.
Yeah, and some of the good questions you asked made me think I'll have to interview you again and ask some better questions. So
that was my whole goal, is just to make you feel crappy. So
I don't feel crappy.
No,
I feel good.
Just kidding.
I feel honored.
No, this is cool. So I'm gonna try to do the closeout thing. You always do it, but I'm gonna see if I can remember it all.
Yeah, do it.
So hey, if you like this podcast, we have other ones, and they're definitely different, but still super cool and unique. There's a Free Play podcast, which is Bubba, Matt, and Kate, way funnier than we are, and they just talk, man. They just talk about nerd stuff and what's happening, and have a really great time doing it, and try to involve their listeners as well in that. We also have the Pull List podcast, which is our boys Chris and Hector. And these guys know comics like you would not believe. And even if you don't know comics, they will welcome you in with open arms and make you like comics and spend a lot of money. So be careful. Listener, beware.
For real.
Also, check out our website. Everything that you got to hear Drew talk about, I mean, that DNA is knitted through our entire website and all the content we produce. So lovethynerd.com. Check it out. You know, if there's stuff you want to read about a certain game, just search it. And we've probably got something up there about it. We've also got some Facebook Live video shows, Beard Bros, co-optional. Check those out. A lot of tabletop game coverage. We give away stuff as well. And also, if you like all this stuff that we do, help us do it. Be a part of helping us do it. Submit, a pitch for an article. Talk to Drew about how to do that. Partner with us financially. Even $1 a month. You would not believe if everybody decided to do that. Man, that'd go a long way. So lovethynerd.com/partner. And lastly, if you want to find me or Drew, you can email us, Chris@lovethynerd.com, Drew@lovethynerd.com. You can find Drew on Twitter @DrewDixon82.
Nailed it.
Oh,
got it.
You could find me on Twitter, but I don't recommend it because I'm never on there. Instead, you can find me on Facebook, CL Gwaltney, GWALTNEY. So, hey, thanks for listening, guys. We appreciate you. We love you. And we'll catch you next time. Thanks, Drew.
Yeah, thanks, man.